What's going on? It's your boy Sermon at Sermon's Domain on Twitter. Rico Wade, Sleepy Brown, and Ray Murray have made such a huge impact on hip hop. I just got done watching The Art of Organized Noize on Netflix, and I felt like sharing some thoughts, do a little review on it. The documentary, which is directed by Quincy Jones III, for QD3, and if you know anything about QD3, they did the Beef documentaries back in the day. And so it was a really nice, well put together documentary that chronicles the beginnings of Organized Noize up until the current. Like they want to hopefully put out more music, rebrand, maybe even do an album. But in between that, it starts off, how they met each other. And then part of it seems like a part of an Outcast documentary in a sense of, we get the early years of, Dre and Big Boy being around the dungeon at Rico's house. And, you hear about how they were able to get to L.A. Reid to sign Outkast because it was not easy to do. At first, L.A. Reid didn't have any interest in signing Outkast, and he gave them a shot with Players Ball on a LaFace Christmas compilation. And because that record blew up so well, they were actually given, a contract. They were given that shot. And then the documentary goes through, it just goes through different sections of their career. Another thing that was cool was hearing the story of how Waterfalls came together. And the thing about it is these guys are producers, so being producers, they're able to describe the story better than just we were in the studio and, I came up with this and we came up with that and we had to produce. No, they're literally breaking down like the sounds of everything that was going into that beat. And it's really cool to hear. Another thing was how they ended up going to Interscope, and their deal was for $20 million. That's a hell of a lot of money. But ultimately, they only got 3. And then their contract was terminated. The reason for this is because, Jimmy Iovine wanted them to really give more records that were like Waterfalls. And unfortunately, you can't just deliver those kind of records all the time. The albums that they did put out from members of the Dungeon family did well, but they weren't well enough to justify the contract that they had, and so ultimately that's pretty much why it ended up being terminated. And then the one thing that really stood out to me in the documentary is like you really get the true family vibe from everyone. You have so many people speaking about Organized Noize, and that's like the thing. They seem like a family. Talking about the dungeon days when there was, 10, 15 people in the studio and they were sleeping on the floors together. Some of them didn't even have blankets. Like they slept on a blanket, but they didn't have one to cover themselves. So you get that vibe from them. And just the way that like Rico speaks at times. You can tell that he's very passionate about what he does. Especially because there's a part where towards the end he's talking about how he's not a part of Speaker Box and The Love Below, and you could hear that frustration that comes from it. It was one of those scenes where it's like, damn, like he was really mad about it, and he still seems kind of mad about it. But luckily, the two sides aren't like they're not bickering or beefing, none of that. And another thing that Rico was talking about too was about like publishing, because it was on the conversation of why Rico isn't bigger or why Organized Noize itself isn't bigger, and like on the level of Puff Daddy, because you have the 3 that pretty much help Outkast get to where they are. So that question came up, and his answer was basically like he didn't want to take the publishing from Outkast or Goody Mob. He wanted to be fair, and like he was talking about how on the Outkast debut album, how they would be writing the hooks and producing the beats, but they would still only take 50% when he could, if they really wanted to, they could have got 75% of the publishing because they're doing all that work. But They only went 50. They went 50. So again, that goes back to like that family vibe, and you know, you got to commend Rico for that. The other thing that I wanted to kind of talk about was there's towards the end you got like what is coming up with Organized Noise. You see them in the studio with Nipsey, and that record still hasn't surfaced, so it might be on Nipsey's upcoming project, or maybe it's on that Organized Noise one. And then Big Boy also let it out that Organized Noise is co-executive producing his next solo album, which is exciting to hear. I'm very interested to see what they can come up with. But overall, it was a really good documentary. If you have Netflix, I recommend watching it. Definitely, without a doubt, 100%. It's always good when you get a documentary on something that you're not really expecting. You would expect a documentary on, a Dr. Dre or a Just Blaze, the producers that are mega giants. But Organized Noise, at least in this generation, doesn't get the credit they deserve. So having this documentary, it provides new stories for people who've been longtime fans to hear about how Outkast's debut album came together, how TLC's Waterfalls came together. And it also educates this new generation, because if they see people like, if they see people like us and people like journalists and, other artists endorsing this documentary, then they're going to want to check it out and see what they missed. And then that goes into them checking out Outkast music or TLC's music or Goody Mob's albums. So it's a really good thing to have this documentary. And like I said, I definitely think you should go check it out. And if you have checked it out, let me know what you think in the comment section below. And then like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, share the video. Follow me on Twitter @SermonsDomain. And as always, thank you for your time. I appreciate you for watching. And until next time, peace.